Welcome back to You Are Your Business podcast. And I'm super excited to be connecting with Dylan today, who is an Etsy expert. And I feel like all things e commerce. So, for our listeners, why don't you share a bit about kind of who you are and what you do?
Yes, yes. Well, I'm excited to be here, Amy. Thank you for having me. So my background is corporate e-commerce. I got started for a company called Zappos. Tony Hsieh was the CEO, and delivering happiness. That's kind of what he's known for, the culture and that whole thing. So very, very much a customer first approach. And then I moved up to Seattle, worked for Zulily for a little bit, and then met someone in the military. You move a lot, so I ended up starting my own thing, and Etsy was one of those side hustles that ended up just taking hold. And I applied everything from corporate e-commerce to that. And 8 years later, here we are, and now we're teaching about 4,000 Etsy sellers how to scale their businesses.
That's amazing. And so, I guess a bit for our listeners too. So, like, how did you kind of get, like, why Etsy? What got you
Yeah.
kind of started on that journey?
Yeah, so Etsy was, I think I found Etsy on Pinterest. I was not an Etsy shopper at all. And this isn't that long ago. This was 2016, roughly, 2016. So I was doing all these side hustles because I was having a hard time finding a corporate e-commerce job here in San Diego. Moving from Seattle, which is like the mecca of e-commerce and tech, it was not that way here. So I was dog walking, I was house sitting, I was flipping things from the thrift store on Facebook Marketplace. I was doing Craigslist, eBay, and Etsy was just one of those many things. Yeah.
Amazing. And so, did you kind of just like dive into like learning about Etsy? Like, what was, I guess, kind of like your first product that
Yeah.
you started with on it?
Yeah, so I took a picture of something that I had made for our wedding, which was a letter J for our last name, and it was made out of foam and toothpicks. And it was kind of shaped in a letter J, and we put fake flowers all over it. So we took a picture of it, put it one picture on Etsy, and I just left it there. And then 2 months later, we're leaving for the honeymoon and it's sold. Like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I could not ship foam and toothpicks. That would be, you know,
Yeah.
that'd be really bad.
Don't think the post office with like the toothpicks and yeah, it wouldn't stay intact too, probably. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we figured out, my husband figured out how to use wood and kind of engineer this. And that was the first thing we started selling. And I realized, wow, like I can't believe that sold, first of all. So I started applying everything from e-commerce, that experience, to Etsy. And then within 2 months of that, we're making over 10,000 a month consistently from that point on.
That's amazing. And it just started with an idea from your wedding and it's kind of like blossomed from there.
Yeah, yeah. It just that one idea. The first year we had about two different types of products with about 200 listings. We just positioned them in different ways with different keywords, and we did 134 grand in year one.
That's so cool. And I think it's also a platform I think a lot of us don't really consider, really, because I think a lot of us in the business world we're looking at like Instagram or Facebook and all these other LinkedIn, like all these other platforms, and we never really considered Etsy to be like such a search engine for one, but two, a platform that would be a great one for selling on too.
Yeah, and the benefit of Etsy, it's like having a marketing team basically for you. They bring so much traffic. They bring a lot from Google as well, so you're going to be ranking nice and high on Google with those Etsy listings. They pay for offsite ads for you on your behalf. So there's a lot to, having them behind you, I would say, as kind of a marketing fuel for you. It's probably the fastest place to build a brand right now out of any marketplace when you consider Shopify or Amazon. And you can sell almost anything. You can sell services, you can sell products, spreadsheets, digital, physical. There's so much you can sell there.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking even like I've purchased like invitations for my daughter's like birthdays and stuff like that off of Etsy, but I've never considered like a service or like a course or something like that to sell on there.
Yeah, yeah. Any courses, digital products, also anything you could sell on Fiverr or Upwork, you could sell as a service through Etsy.
That's amazing. I've never considered that, and I'm sure our listeners probably haven't considered that as well either. Because 'cause I'm even thinking, like, within my own business, I sell, like, templates for, like, ClickUp
Mhm.
and stuff like that, so that's even something that would be, like, beneficial and that could be used on Etsy too.
Totally. Yeah, I have someone in our program who does Kajabi templates,
Yep.
and Thrivecart templates. So there's a ton to that. Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking I have another, person that I've worked with that does Canva templates, so I'm sure that would be, like, a big one as well too.
Huge. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much you can sell. So if you're like looking at even having another stream to a current business, Etsy's a great channel with a super low barrier to entry.
Well, absolutely, because it sounds like too, it's there's not a big as learning curve as there might be with like I'm thinking of like Amazon or some other platforms as well too. There might be a bit of more of a learning curve compared to Etsy too.
Yeah, yeah, the interface is very customer friendly. It's kind of like, working on an iPhone. Like
Yeah.
you pick up the phone and suddenly somehow you know how to use it. You figure it
Yeah.
out. But I would say there's an illusion that it's easy to use, but the strategy still requires strategy. And because it's so easy to get set up, get a listing out there, there's a lot of bad listings kind of cluttering the marketplace that
Yep.
don't have SEO. They have terrible photos. Um, and it's, because the barrier is a little lower. Yeah,
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. That's kind of like with any platform that you're using, you're really wanting to make sure again that you're using the branding, the SEO like specific for that platform, like, you wouldn't use the same thing on Instagram that you're like, strategy that you're using on Etsy. Is that kind of
totally.
like yeah, the
Yep.
approach?
Yeah, yep, very different than selling through socials. But we like to look at it kind of as a cohesive brand. So Etsy could be one of your channels, social media, Instagram, TikTok shop, um,
Yeah,
for as long as we have access to it, Uh, basically, yeah. And then Shopify is great as well. So it's part of like your business ecosystem.
right.
Yeah.
And so is there anything, when someone's like, building out their Etsy shop, some key factors for them to kind of like consider? I know you had talked about SEO. Is there maybe something else that they should be considering as well too, that they might not thought of?
Yeah, excuse me. I would say one thing that I think people kind of start out with where it lays a rocky foundation is choosing products that maybe you see selling on Etsy, and then you end up with these products like maybe it's a digital template and a planner and a checklist, and it's all these random products that you think will sell because you've seen them sell in other shops, but then it's missing the customer, and your shop is not targeting a profitable customer. You just have these random products that kind of maybe are, cheaper copies of someone else's. And we kind of started the wrong way. So instead, if you're thinking about doing this, start with the customer and then build your product mix around them. And the whole idea is just to have something that's going to be consistent. So, has a good lifetime value of the customer, and you can serve them for 4 to 7 years. So really just I would say start with the customer instead of the product.
That I think is a very good point, and I think that can be taken anywhere in business as well too. I think a lot of times people are creating offers based on like a need that they see for their own business as opposed to a need that the client actually needs and that would be serving the client as well too.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think and when it comes to, even creating an offers, like, we have this coaching business. We also have a software now that we launched for Etsy sellers. But, looking at really what the need is, and not just what you think is cool, but really establishing strong product market fit for going all in on something is so valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it even goes back to like having those conversations with like potential clients or current clients and really doing that market research. I think again is a piece that kind of gets missed along with the client journey too.
Totally. Yeah. And we even recommend, because a lot of people think, oh, I'll just get the feedback from Etsy. If things sell, then the feedback is people like it. Well, your stuff might not be even good enough to get any sales. So
Yes.
we actually tell people take screenshots of what you have put them on Facebook, not your friends, but in other Facebook groups, and ask your customer in those groups that your customer is already in, do you like A or B? If they don't like either, they will tell you.
Yes, and I think that's such a good point again, like interacting with people, but it's also building that awareness
Yeah.
too, that you're what you're doing and that what you're offering as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And, some people use ads to try to establish if there's a demand for a product, but that's
Yep.
a very expensive experiment. And so, I would say start by really having those touch points. Ads really aren't going to
Yep.
give you that qualitative feedback in the same way customer interaction would.
No, absolutely. And you brought up a point too about how you could serve your customer from like 4 to 7 years, which is something I'd never really considered in like the client journey. Can you touch on that a bit more as well too?
Yeah, totally. So it's way easier to increase the lifetime value of a customer that you've already acquired versus just chasing new transactions, new
Mm-hmm.
customers. Like it's actually exhausting. And it's
100. Yes.
yeah, it's exhausting and it's unpredictable, right? It's like, okay, what's my customer acquisition cost right now? And you're constantly having to play to that. So instead, we look at, okay, how can we start with a customer at one point in their life or in this area of their life, and then serve them in different areas of their life for a good period of time. So for me, I started in wedding. So I started in the
Yep.
wedding market, and then I moved into baby. And then I moved into first birthday parties and then baptisms and, um, even teacher things. Because now these kids, these people, I did their bachelorette parties, their bridal showers, their weddings, their nurseries, first birthday parties, and now things for the kids' teachers. So
Yes.
yeah, you see how the journey,
Yep. Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So if you can look at that, no matter who your customer is, it doesn't have to be, you know, through milestone events, but maybe it's like the life cycle of a business. Maybe it's, you do, kind of kits for podcast agencies or something. Well, from launch to then scaling to hiring and beyond, you want to serve them through stages so they can grow with you.
Absolutely. And then it's continuing to like grow and evolve your own business throughout that client journey as well. And like you said, making sure the client retention is really important because I think again that's something that's missed and like you mentioned it's exhausting, and I see so many new entrepreneurs feeling like they're constantly throwing spaghetti at the wall, like finding these clients or getting these clients when instead they're not focusing on that real client experience and giving the customer what they're looking for essentially.
Totally. And I really think nowadays I call it the invisible playing field of
Yep.
customer service because it's hard for your competition to see it and just copy it. That experience is something that can be a real competitive advantage. And if you put time and effort and investment into that, um, it should increase the lifetime value of the customer. So you want to make sure you can still serve them.
Yes, absolutely. And even when you're saying to like the 4 to 7 year mark, like that's your as your business is growing and evolving, like, you're still maintaining that client and they're growing along with you, and like you mentioned for your example, like, the different milestones that they're having, like, you're always that kinda step ahead of
Yeah.
the client journey as well, like, "Okay, well, I'm predicting they're gonna need this now, and then they're gonna need this thing," so, like, you're still in that creativity and flow of as an entrepreneur, like, building the next thing, but you're going along with your client through it.
Totally. And, I found that's the same thing in our coaching business. We started with Etsy sellers who were brand new. And then we realized, we don't want them to outgrow us. So now, 2.5 years in, we have this inner circle for people who've now ascended into, they're doing a couple $100,000 a month for some of them. And
Yep.
we still want to be able to serve them.
No, absolutely. So question I do have though, I know some of my listeners have like physical products
Mm.
that they sell. And so I know sometimes some of their concerns are around like the shipping and stuff like that too, right? So I think within like Etsy, do you typically find that it's more services and like digital products that tend to have a better turnover rate compared to physical products? Or what would you kind of suggest for that?
Oh man, I would say so at the very top, like our top 5% of sellers who are doing the highest revenue, it is 90% physical products and
Yeah.
not digital. Um,
Really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So digital, because digital, unless you have you know, pretty decent price points. Like, let's say a good example would be a like website templates that are customized and includes the service of installation.
Mhm.
Okay, that would be could be a few $1,000s per order, but oftentimes digital products are like $5 or less.
Right.
Really hard. So,
Yeah.
the physical products typically are just they just have a lot more potential.
Okay. That's interesting because I was thinking it was gonna be the reverse, that would be more like the digital and services that would have been more of like the selling as opposed to the physical products.
Yeah, and I think with digital and services, specifically digital without services, it's such a low barrier to entry, like Canva templates and things, that it's like the go-to, and you can do it without doing it well, which creates a lot of noise and clutter.
That's
Yeah,
true, and again, it brings back to the point of, like, how are you standing out in your
yeah,
business and, like, this client journey and, like, the customer experience type of thing too.
totally. Yeah, and with physical
Fascinating.
products, there's so many ways to compete. So many.
Definitely there is too, yes. So how much time do you think is really typically, like, dedicated to, like, growing, like, an Etsy shop kinda thing? Because I feel like it wouldn't be one of those, like, set it and forget it type of approaches where sometimes people think that it's that way, right?
Yeah, definitely not. I would say at least an hour a day consistently is what I recommend. Now, for me, I would rather see you doing an hour a day, 7 days a week than 1 day a week for 7 hours.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a ton of time. It's definitely something you could do on the side, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you had mentioned that you had went from like corporate into entrepreneurship. So I know some of our listeners are kind of new, some are newer to business. So what are maybe some mindset shifts that you had to make going from like the corporate world into like, oh my goodness, now I'm my own CEO?
Yeah. So I will say I was always pretty entrepreneurial. Both of my parents have had their own businesses. And I was also always doing some kind of a side hustle. And when I do something, I'm like all or nothing.
Yeah.
So I was heavily blogging through college and early in my career, and it got pretty big. And so I kind of I get obsessive about things, which if you're like obsessive about things, it can help you as an entrepreneur
Yes.
a little bit.
Definitely.
So I took that with me. That always stayed with me. But really, I would say this is hard because it's a little controversial, but um, not going halfway and just going all the way. I would put in 18-hour days, do whatever it took. I would do what my competition was not willing to do. And I knew it was because that those were my controllables. So as an entrepreneur, what can you control? It's sometimes feels like you don't have much control if you don't want to invest much money.
Yeah.
So really look at, okay, I do have my time. My time is my like most prevalent asset right now. So then go all in with the time investment.
And I think that's such a really good point that you bring up because I think a lot of times we see people sharing, like, I created my business in 4-hour work weeks and stuff like that, and not realizing that, the time that they put and the effort they put in to get to that. And like you said, it's going all in and not kind of half-assing things because then um, you can only get so far with the effort that you're putting in.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like to get to the 4-hour work weeks, it might be some like 16-hour days for 6 months or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
then so for your own journey, you started off with Etsy, and then, like, when did you eventually, like, hire a team? Like, when did you kinda continue to blossom in that aspect?
Yeah, so too late, I would say, too late. I think that's one of my pitfalls, was and I've tried to really correct this now, but, hiring too late instead of anticipating the hires and really having a good pipeline ready to go. So for me, I didn't hire someone until we were well over 300,000 a year. And even then it was just an assistant that did like 10 hours a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I should have we missed so much, and there's so much opportunity and money left on the table because I was the constraint of the business. Yeah.
Which we all are at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
It's like we sometimes are our own, pitfall and not allowing, sometimes people are scared to invest or we're looking for like the how, when really it's just like trusting your intuition and your gut and just knowing what you're building and growing from there. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So trusting yourself that, okay, there is some proof of concept here. If I hire someone, I'm not going to overextend us financially, and
Yep.
they will pay for themselves if they're the right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And then giving yourself that time to be creative and to continue to like scale and grow the business as well, too.
totally. Yes. So I always say like, okay, if you're hitting that 15,000 a month mark, it's a really good time to consider having someone to help you. Yeah, at
Yeah.
least or
Yes.
less. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So one of the things that you had mentioned, I believe was on your website I saw, was you've done a lot of your marketing organically without paid ads. Is that kind of still your approach to things as well too?
Yeah, so it's a little different for our coaching business versus the product business.
Yep.
Our product business, our sellers really typically don't do any ads. Maybe 5% touch ads for their products, whether it's digital or physical. So about 5% do ads, and that's going all the way up to 8 million per year in their annual revenue. So it's very, very few are doing ads. With our coaching business, we were actually able to get to 8 figures without any ads, which, was it's a focus on organic, and it still is primarily how we've grown
Yep.
this business. But it's worth it because then you have that baked in sources of leads and traffic and customers. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, it's as an entrepreneur, we kind of tend to be like everywhere, right? So for some of our listeners, as I mentioned, some are newer, some have been in business for a couple of years.
Mhm.
So is there like a couple platforms you would suggest for them to kind of like start with and then continue to grow on before I'm assuming Etsy would be one of them, but then
Yeah.
what would some other aspects be too?
Yeah. So last fall we actually sold our brand, and it gives me a different perspective on what channels I kind of would recommend going on to. Now, even if you have no plan or aspiration to have an exit strategy, it's always nice to have the option.
Yes.
Having an option is just gives you more leverage. So I would recommend definitely having your own website, but I would start with Etsy, get it up to at least 80,000 a year, and then get your own website. I would also consider things like Fair. There's also, of course, Amazon, there's Walmart, there's
Yeah.
other platforms for digital products as well. So I would start with Etsy just because speed is your friend there.
Absolutely. Well, and it sounds like too, how you're mentioning before, they do a lot of the marketing for you. So it's a great kind of segue to continue to get that growth in your business too.
Totally. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then long term, you can't sell an Etsy shop. If you wanted to, you can't sell it, but you could sell your brand and those other accounts and channels.
Really? So you can't sell your Etsy shop because it's attached specifically to you?
Yes, to your name, email, tax ID, that type of thing. So
Right.
yeah, yeah, you don't want to try to sell an Etsy shop. People try to do it, and it just puts the buyer in a huge risk. Yeah.
No, that makes sense too. So would you consider Pinterest to be like a good platform to use as well? Because then you could be doing pins and that's like leading people to like buy off of your Etsy shop as well too.
Yes. So with excuse me, with Pinterest, that actually drove around 500,000 visits to the shop at no cost. So it's funny when you set up a Pinterest business account, they will like call you or try to get you on a sales call to sell you ad space and stuff. But you really don't need to do that. You can be very successful just with organic methods with Pinterest. So Pinterest is huge, and it's really the long game. People do Pinterest for like 2 weeks and then they're disappointed.
Yes.
They're like, well, it didn't work for me. Well, give it another 12 months.
Yes. I think that can be with anything though. I think people try something and then they give up too soon because they're not getting these quick instant results that they're expecting to get, realizing that podcasting's a long game, Etsy's a long game, Pinterest, like all of it's your business is a long game, right? Like you're in it for the long experience.
Yeah. And if you're looking for quick money in 2 weeks, then go drive Uber or something.
Yes, exactly. Or a job essentially that
Yeah.
gives you like a paycheck every 2 weeks as well.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So if you could go back and give yourself some advice for when you were kind of just starting out, what is something that you would kind of say to yourself?
Oh man. I would say to, I think a lot of people are looking online for side hustles.
Hmm.
And your side hustle will never become a main hustle if you don't treat it like that from day one. So for me, I was dabbling in all these different things to see what would work. And I honestly think it was luck that something sold on Etsy because if it hadn't, I none of those side hustles would have worked. I was putting in, let's say there were 5 things, I was putting in 20% effort into each thing, trying to compete against people who are putting in 100% of their effort. So if you're going to do a side hustle with the intention of making it big, just go 100% from the beginning.
That's amazing advice. And also knowing that you can shift as well too, right? Like you've kind of shifted your direction of from your J with the toothpicks into like, okay, how can we make the next thing, right? So
Exactly. Yeah. And the first thing you try, the first thing you test, I could almost guarantee it's not what you will be known for a year from now. But you have to get that testing and customer data going. Otherwise, we won't move anywhere.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's kind of so you sold your brand last
Yeah.
year. So what's kind of on the horizon now for like 2025?
Yeah. So I actually sold it to one of my clients.
Oh,
Um,
that's amazing.
Yeah, so I still get to work with them and coach them on it, which is great. So we have about 4,000 sellers. Our team's almost 40 people. So that keeps me very busy. My husband is getting out of the military at the 15-year mark, so he's stepping in as our COO. So we'll
Very
be,
cool.
yeah, working together. We're going to be moving out of California, not sure where, in the next 3 months, and then really scaling the software brand to hopefully be about the size of our coaching business.
And so the software brand, can you tell me, like, share a little bit more what that is exactly?
Yeah. So one of my mentors is Alex Hermosi. Do you know him?
I do. Yep, I'm familiar
Yeah.
with him. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were working with him a couple of years ago and talking about different ways to scale this coaching business. And software was an idea, a seed that he kind of planted in my mind. Like, Dylan, you should totally have a software that is complementary. Um, so we've been really looking at the pain points of our clients and realizing that SEO took so much time from them
Mhm.
and it slowed them down in scaling. So we created an SEO software called Etsio. So ETS.
Love that. Yes.
Yeah. And launched it in October. So yeah, it scaled pretty quickly just with our user base to start with. And
Yes.
yeah, it's going pretty well.
That's amazing. And then you also have the Etsy course that like people can purchase as well too if they're looking to start growing a business and selling like products on Etsy too.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
that's really what I focus like probably like 12 hours of my day on.
Yeah.
And that's where we do the one-on-one personalized coaching. So we really hold your hand, give you custom guidance, and help you really start or scale if you're already on Etsy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. So for any of our listeners, is there any kind of parting advice or words or things you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely, if you are looking for something to bring you consistent income, you want to work from home, definitely, definitely check Etsy out as a great option. And we have a ton of free videos you can watch on the YouTube channel. Just look up Dylan Etsy, and it'll really give you a good idea of if would align with what you want to do with your life.
Amazing. I'll make sure to include those in the show notes as well too. Your YouTube channel and then you also your Instagram and website and anything else you'd like to be added as well too.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah. Excited to connect with your audience.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Dylan. You've completely opened my eyes to the possibilities of Etsy and, continuing to grow business. So thank you so much.
Oh, good. Thanks for having me, Amy. This was great.